Let's discuss what we learned from the two games at the LA Kings rookie faceoff.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken. I am your host, Erica L. Ayala. I am also a contributor at CBS Sports, where I cover women's basketball and the National Hockey League. Also the founder of Black Rosie Media, where we empower Black women and melanated creators in sports media. Locked On Kraken, of course, is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team every single day. That's right. We are back to 5 days a week, and we'll have a special announcement about how we're going to fill one of those 5 days coming up for you. But I want to let you know today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So we talked about the rookie face-off. The LA Kings hosted the rookie face-off. This would be the first time that our prospects would head to a rookie development camp, get to test their mettle, if you will, against other rookies. And the Seattle Kraken prospects, they split the weekend. They played the Utah Hockey Club, and that was a 5-1 victory, just peppering the goal early and often in that game. Didn't have as much success on Sunday, where they had to come from behind a 4-goal deficit, ultimately, though, dropping that contest to the Vegas prospects 5-3. So there are a few things I think that we learned from this rookie camp, or this little kind of mini tournament. And again, we talked about this, but the Seattle Kraken prospects weren't there for the first day, and today is the last day of the tournament. So didn't have as many games. And we heard from Coach Derek Laxdal, some of the other teams, you could tell they had gotten a little bit of the jitters out of their system. You heard from some of the players, Jagger, Firkus, Catton, Berkly, Catton, that they felt that there was a little bit of an adjustment period. So take this with a grain of salt, take it for what it is. But these are a few things that I noticed. I didn't watch all of the games, but from what I was able to watch, this is what I got. First of all, this is more of a comment than an observation, but I like that we're getting the rookies some competition in rookie camp. To me, that's going to help them jump to the level that they need to be at when we get to training camp. And I'm going to talk about this in the next segment, but spoiler alert for those who maybe don't tune in every day, but for the everydayers and OGers, especially who've been with me since the beginning of the show, you know that the last 2 training camps, well, I guess especially last training camp, I talked about I want to see competition. I want to see the energy ramped up in training camp so that when we hit preseason, we're really hitting on all cylinders. So anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by that in the next segment. But I just like this concept for the Kraken prospects. I think it's a little bit of an interesting situation for this particular class of prospects because you have so much change happening at the coaching level. And I mean, there's always going to be change every year, whether it's trades and drafts and things of that nature. So I'm not necessarily talking about the change happening on the roster. I'm more so talking about when we get the opportunity for our rookies to hopefully go to more of these competitions during rookie training camp. They'll know the systems, they'll know the coaching staff, they'll have a little bit more of a feel of each other, and the coaches will know the systems, they'll know the coaching staff. We talked about how Derek Laxdal is going to have to just find different approaches than he might take because he wants to match the system that is going to be played at the NHL level for the Seattle Kraken. So that's just a broad observation. I'm not sure how much, if at all, any of the things that I think will improve over time impacted this year. I think it's just what I'm saying is it's a natural progression, and it has a lot of opportunity, I think, to impact what we see at the NHL training camp, which is what I'm most excited about. So when it comes to things that I saw, this is going to be a fast team. You saw the speed. Even Coach Laxdell talked about it. I don't remember if he talked about it on Saturday or Sunday, but he talked about the passing immediately. I love what we're seeing from the passing perspective. But I will also say, and this is something that we talked about for those of you who really followed our journey with the AHL Firebirds last year, that the Firebirds sometimes would pass a little bit too much. We had this funny joke about Logan Morrison when we had JD Hernandez on the show about how the NHLers were trying to set him up for a goal and all he wanted to do was pass the puck. You know, it was a funny moment, but I think if I had to be nitpicky, on the one hand, I loved the passing. On the other hand, I want to see the decision making be a little sharper. It's not that it was bad, but it took some time to integrate. And Berkly and Jagger and a lot of the Lomo himself, they talked about that. So some of it was just getting used to playing, sometimes you're too ramped up, sometimes you're too subdued, but they just had to get a feel for the game. Whereas some of the other competition, again, they competed on Friday, so they got those jitters out of the way. So just an observation, but the passing is not something that we're going to have to teach, which I love. The decision making and the quick thinking will come, so it's not something that I'm worried about. Other observations that I made is that I'm not surprised here, but I do think they're going to have to be defensive improvements. Now, we talked on Friday's episode that Coach Derek, he knew that there were certain things that they just didn't have a lot of time to really hunker down and get to the details. And defensive assignments, if I'm not mistaken, was one of them. And I think you could tell from just how the team played at times. I also think this is a little bit symptomatic of how we've drafted, that we're not drafting necessarily defensemen or defensive minded players. And I get it. I understand it. And again, everydayers, OGers, I'm not impressed by what the Kraken, do defensively. And I remember I got asked this question once because the Kraken obviously were not in the playoffs last year. And like, what is a playoff team, or who's a team that you think does things well defensively? Well, let's just keep it in the division. Now, I have to take a close look at the Kings this year, but we've talked about this on the show before. The LA Kings, at least up until the midway point of whenever they had their coaching change, you knew that when you played the Kings, you had to fight to get past the center ice line, because their MO, even if you could get to the center ice line, their MO was to absolutely devastate their opponents in the neutral zone. They wanted to control everything in the neutral zone. Now, in my opinion, why I think that's good defense is because you are having those defensive efforts further away from your goaltender. And if something squeaks out, you get a breakaway. A breakaway is kind of a 50-50 opportunity. And we saw that, I think it was Firkus. Yeah, he talked about some breakaways that he wished he could have had back. When it's a breakaway, you just got to, you trust in your player in the breakaway, and there's not really much else to do. It's skill on skill. But if you can mitigate that, and even if you do cough up the puck, you let the offense, kind of get a little deeper. If you push them up that high, or if you're creating that kind of, it's not a full court press in basketball in like perfect terms, but it's almost like picking up at the foul line in basketball. For those who know basketball, you want to put that defensive pressure and force the offense to make decisions earlier and further away from the basket or the goal, the net. So that's a type of defensive system, and the Kings have done that. I think also if you watch how Vegas plays, they're not as technical when it comes to, or as smothering in the neutral zone, but they will stand you up on the blue line. And there's a lot of other teams that do that as well. But particularly, they are very mindful of when there are offensive players in the slot area. Now, that is something I do not think the Kraken do a good job of, but the Vegas Golden Knights in games again in the last few years and in the last run in the playoffs that I've seen, that is one thing that I like about Vegas is that they will pick up in the slot. I cannot stand when there are roaming players in front of the net. I know Vince Dunn gave a quote on that, and I listen. I hear where Vince is coming from, and I don't think that's the most technically sound way to play defense. If you're an everyday or an OGer, you might know. Just for those maybe who don't know, Vince Dunn once said something. He was asked about bodies in front of the net, and he said something like, "Well, for people who don't know hockey, you might think that you want to clear the net," something like that. He said, and listen, I think there's a time and a very specific circumstance where he can be correct. And overall, my opinion is the Kraken leave too many bodies in front of the net and don't have enough bodies in front of the net when we're on offense. That's a whole nother thing. Okay, final takeaway before we get into what I think needs to happen or what I'll be looking out for at training camp. Final thing from Rookie Faceoff. We're not a big, strong team. Again, Coach Derek Laxdal talked about this. Looking at the rosters, we were one of the younger rosters. There was an article, I think it was Jeff or Bob, I can't remember, wrote the article and saying that the Seattle Kraken sent 6 players at 18. And I think it was the Vegas team who we played that had no players 18. Just as an example, we really leaned into the young part of the prospects of the rookie camp, where that wasn't necessarily the case, at least in the team that suited up against us. So what am I saying there? What do I think the lesson is? I think it goes back to recruitment. I think it goes back to some of the front office draft questions that I have overall. I want to see us do a little bit better with getting young defensive talent. I'd like to see us up our size, either height or kind of just broadness, I think that we can really beef up there. That is where the Seattle Kraken rely on veterans. And I think that's smart as well, because it's one thing to be 18 years old and have a big frame. But do you know how to use that big frame comparative to 30-year-old guys with a big frame and who can throw their weight around? That's different. I'm just saying we're not a big team. Now, big, and tall and being broad, can you manage? Can you maneuver? Of course. But of course, having some weight, having some physicality. We get pushed around a lot. And our guys are starting to say it. Our prospects are saying it. Matty Beniers said it in his most recent media availability, which we'll talk about later in this week. These guys know that they get bullied around every once in a while. So yeah, beefing up, I'd like to see that. And maybe that leads to also what I want to see in training camp. We're going to talk about that coming up on this episode of Locked On Kraken. Now, today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our good friends. I mentioned them at the top of the show. It's FanDuel. Now, with FanDuel, we talk about them all the time because they've been a sponsor forever. But what we love about FanDuel is that they're always looking for ways to make things exciting for you as a fan. And this is what they're doing. FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook, is doing something different for you now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Now, while this is a promo for those of you who really want to watch the Seahawks play, maybe you want to watch Pittsburgh lose. I mean, there's some of you out there, no judgment, do what you do. This is for any fan, whether you're a fan of football. I don't watch much American football, but I can still use this plan. NFL Sunday Ticket. You want to entertain some folks around football season. But either way, whether you tap into NFL Sunday Ticket, which just seems like a pretty good deal, or not, you know that FanDuel has you covered when it comes to WNBA. You can check those odds out. You got to see where the Seattle Storm are going to land. Probably going to take on the Aces in the first round. And as the 5 seed, which means they won't have home court advantage, which I was hoping they would, so that I could see the first 2 games for sure of the series. They'll just have to win one and bring it back to CPA. Then you can also take a look at the NHL odds, NHL future odds. Where do we stand in the division? They say 5th right now overall. That's about where we see a lot of other pundits putting the Kraken. I'll let you know my thoughts once I get to Seattle. I leave tomorrow and get to training camp and get to see the guys on the ice. We'll talk about that coming up. But remember, visit fanduel.com to download America's #1 sports book. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here. And you can check out Locked On NHL for all of your other needs. JD Young is the host of Locked On Sharks in our division, of course, and also one of the co-hosts of Locked On NHL, where on Tuesdays he gives a roundup of all the goings on in the Pacific Division. I do feel like we get left out a little bit. What's good with that, JD? It's because I like defense. That's why. That's why. Because I don't think defense is for nerds. Inside joke. We've had a lot of crossovers or squad casts, as I like to say, with JD. But it's funny because some of JD's takeaways from the face-off were about the defense of the Sharks. Anyway, I digress. So make sure you check out Locked On NHL on Fridays. Every other Friday, we have the Women's Hockey Spotlight. We're trying to grow that, especially as we get closer to the second season of the Professional Women's Hockey League, the PWHL. So I'll be on with Rachel and Gil this Friday to keep you updated with what's happening in women's hockey. But let's talk about what's happening this week for the Seattle Kraken. Now, we talked about the rookie showcase, or the face-off, excuse me. The rookie camp will have today, Monday, off. They have a skate session Tuesday, September 17th at 11:30 a.m. And then training camp starts on Thursday. Now, if I had to guess, this is not something that the team necessarily makes public, but you'll probably see a lot of promos going out on maybe Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm assuming that they're using those days for some of the in-house kind of media day stuff that they've got going on. And on Thursday, September 19th, you've got 3 different sessions at Kraken Community Iceplex. So we'll be there from 9 to 1:15. First session is from 9 to 10:15, then 10:30 to 11:45, and then 12 to 1:15. I got to make sure I pack all my snacks, and then I'm ready to go because I will be camped at KCI for the next handful of days. That schedule, 9, 10:30, and 12, 3 sessions, will take us all the way through Saturday. And then on Sunday is when there is a morning skate. There will also at 10 a.m. And then at 11:15, the players that are not going to be playing in the preseason game against the Calgary Flames that evening will hit the ice. We'll have a day off on September 23rd, and then the team will have a morning skate 10 and 11:15 again on Tuesday before they head out to Vancouver. So I know I gave you the rundown for the next few days, but we'll go over this again. I'll be on site. So if you see me, I won't be hard to spot. I've got the curls, brown hair, and I'll be walking with a boot. I'm not going to show the boot right now because then I'll go and mess up something else. But I'll be walking with a boot, probably a cane as well, just more so for balance. And so I'm not putting a lot of pressure on my hip, my good side, which is actually my bad side from sports. But anyway, so come say hi. I'll be there. I'll be hanging out. And again, we'll have an announcement coming up soon here. We'll have some extra help once a week. And I'm super excited for a partnership that hopefully will only grow and will make things like, of course, all of our content, but especially our Insiders program even better. And so here's what I want to see. For rookie camp, we've got one more day. I really think this is going to be about hunkering down, Derek Laxdal really getting the guys ready to play with the big boys. And it's something that I think Berkly Catton said. One of the guys said this at the rookie face-off. When you're able to go against other people relatively in your age group, some who've been to a rookie camp before, some who are going for the first time, it gives you the repetitions and it gives you the confidence to go in, going up against NHLers, some who've been on the team for a while, some that are coming through trade, through free agency, through PTO, and it is going to be a battle. Now, not a lot of our rookie prospects do I think the Kraken are going to get ready for the NHL season, but there will be some. And I honestly think that they're kind of being handpicked and selected, or at least have an idea of where they stand, because we've already seen some of these guys take on a huge leadership role. And these are guys that have had time. They've played in the last 2 Calder Cup finals with Dan Bilesma, and they might have that skill set and expertise. It's still raw. It still needs to be unearthed a little bit and, polished a little bit. But there is some talent from the fast perspective, from the relentless perspective that we have in our pipeline that I think want to have a very competitive, very aggressive training camp. And this is the point I was alluding to in the first segment. The reason that that's important is because I have felt for the last 2 seasons that when we should have had a competitive training camp, as far as the rigor, as far as really opening up the lungs, like opening up the legs, I don't think we had that. And we had 2 very slow starts to the last 2 seasons. And if you remember in the off season, I talked about they didn't give us any favors when it comes to the schedule. It's an arduous schedule. A lot of things have changed in the National Hockey League, but they're just some teams that when you look at how they play, who they have on their roster, if the Kraken can't level it up in very specific places, those are going to be difficult teams for us to take on with a brand new head coach and arguably with some young blood in the mix, including perhaps a Shane Wright, a Riker Evans, although, Riker had a good run with us last year. Where does Ty Cartier fit? How much of a jump do we need to see, knowing that he's got some of his comrades coming from the Firebirds potentially looking to take up space? I don't think Ty had a bad season, but nothing stood out. And we need some guys to step up. Not just the veterans, although we do expect them to anchor things, but some of the young guys are going to have to step up, if only because and I don't think this is the only reason, but I think it helps when you have that young, spry, fresh leg, fresh mentality perspective. They're not haunted by what happened to the Kraken in the NHL last year. Do they maybe have a chip on their shoulder of what happened in the AHL? It's very possible. But there's a drive, there's a motivation. And I think with Dan and Jessica coming to the Kraken, as well as them knowing enough to know that, the organization wants to change things up, and I'm sure this has been communicated, they have hope. They can see the vision. They can see themselves really making the big league team. And when this has been your goal for so long and there's a path that kind of clears in front of you, I'm hoping that they step up. I'm hoping that they're ready to go from day one. And we know that the veterans are going to be too. They've been doing their own workouts, kind of like quote unquote captain workouts, which is another thing that I think is going to be interesting. Are we going to see leadership emerge? I think if I had to really break it down, the things that I want to see in training camp, and I've alluded to this, is the competition. The competition has to be just at another level. I want this to, like, literally guys are fighting for paychecks. I want to see the passion. I want to see the drive. I talked about it when I talked about the rookie face-off. I think it still stands. What are going to be the defensive improvements? What is Bilesma's staff going to do to just focus to make sure in all 3 zones that there is a concentration on retrieving the puck, getting the puck back, winning 50-50 battles? And then I also talked about this in the rookie face-off section, but leadership. And, a lot of people wanting to know who's going to be the next captain. That's not my biggest concern. I understand. I would like to see a captain, but I think we have to see kind of candidates, captain worthy candidates step up. So that's what I'm a little bit more concerned with. Kate Shefty, if you check out the Seattle Times, has on her 5 things to look at ahead of training camp. One of them, will the Kraken name their second captain? The Kraken have never had a superstar, so an argument could be made for roughly half the roster. Contract length can be telling, and in that regard, Larson is set to be around the longest of the alternate captains, signing a 4-year extension Tuesday that's set to kick in next season. Eberle signed a 2-year extension this spring. Matty Beniers is a young star for the franchise. And new owner of a 7-year contract. He has the makings of a future captain, but is only 21 and coming off a rocky sophomore season. This is interesting. Vince Dunn is often left out of the conversation, but the Kraken are building around him as well. And Jared McCann kept churning out goals, assists, and special teams contributions, even as the team around him struggled. But perhaps he's already juggling enough responsibilities. Interesting. I think, the contract length is very interesting. It's going to be hard for Eberle at this point to take it, but I think he's one of those leaders for sure. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the Kraken don't name a captain. So where do Stevenson and Montour slot in? Now, this is going to be interesting. There's been a lot of kind of projections when it comes to the lines. I'm not great at projecting lines, especially without an eye test. So I'm going to hold off on that. Some people wondering if Stevenson or Montour could be a captain, especially because, hey, their contracts are long enough. That's for dang sure. But, are they going to be top 6? I freaking hope so with the money that we're dishing out. Speaking of money, this is another one we've been talking about for a long time. Kate Shefty asks, will the Kraken make a deal to free up cap space? $4,286 of projected cap space. That's not a lot. It's not a lot. And then I just talked about this. Which young guns make the team? I think we have an eye on 2 or 3 that seem to have a really good chance, and everyone else will, to quote Ron Francis, have every opportunity to prove that they can earn a spot. And I really hope that the Kraken mean that. I know they have some guys. It seems like Logan Morrison, Wright, and probably Riker Evans and Ottavainen on the blue line. Those are some guys that they're going to be looking at, but I really want to see competition. I hope that Laxdal and Bilesma go in with the attitude, you got to earn your spot. Earn your spot. Make it impossible for me to, put you anywhere but where you believe you deserve to be. Like, that's the kind of energy I hope we see at this camp. Because again, we've looked at it, and I don't want to say out of shape, but not in game shape. There's a difference between being in shape and being in game shape. And the Kraken have not come out the gate early, in my estimation, in the last 2 seasons. So if training camp can be super competitive, open up those lungs, get the legs going, then we go into a short preseason, just a handful of games. I think that hopefully will be enough to really get the momentum off in the right place. And I think the rookie camp or the rookie face-off, going to the rookie face-off during rookie camp, I hope has a positive impact on just sparking some energy right off the bat, sparking some competition right off the bat. And if anything, it's because, the rookies aren't waiting for that in training camp. They already got a taste. And now they are a little confident that, they felt the puck on their stick. They've, been able to block a few shots, push a few aside, whatever the case is, they'll have that stride going into training camp when they're going to be asked to level it up. Because there's a difference between junior hockey and the AHL. There's a difference between the AHL and the NHL, or at least there should be, right? So I'm curious to see how all that's going to go. Coming up next, what is the Kraken Hockey Network and who has been added to the broadcast? We'll talk about that as we close up this Monday episode of Locked On Kraken. And thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here, reminding you to go listen to Locked On NHL. You can watch it on YouTube. You can stream it through, your Roku, Amazon Fire TV, all of the good stuff. And make sure you listen on Friday for our women's hockey spotlight, our next women's hockey spotlight. We have names and logos for the PWHL. We'll also, I know, Locked On Flyers, we're trying to work on a special interview, so we'll have an update there. Don't want to miss it. You also don't want to miss training camp. I think this is going to be competitive. I think it has to be competitive. And what's great about this time of the year, we got a little taste of it. If you were listening, Evan Pivnik, who is the play-by-play for the Firebirds, we got to hear his voice calling the games, not the greatest angles, but we got to hear his voice calling the games at the rookie face-off. And soon enough, I've already seen Allison and Piper posting things. We will have original content from our fantastic broadcast team, minus Nick Olchek. We've already talked about that. He'll be with Utah. Moving on there. But the Kraken Hockey Network, which is the name now of King 5, Cohn, and Prime. So all of the regional coverage is going to be under the Kraken Hockey Network. And what you can expect is pre- and post-game shows. On September 22nd will be the first broadcast, because that is the first game, the first KHN broadcast against the Calgary Flames. And the Kraken Hockey Network is, quote, your front row seat to the action. Join us all season long and let's defend the deep. So who is the broadcast crew? Well, I'm going to start with the ones that you know. You know that we're going to hear Everett Fitzhugh and Al Kaczynski, as well as Mike Benton on KJR 93.3 FM, as far as the Kraken radio or Kraken audio network. You also know that we're going to have Allison Lucan, Piper Shaw. We're going to have Eddie Olchek, JT Brown, and of course, John Forsland on the broadcast. But who's going to be in the studio? Because remember, we were with Root Sports, and so you'd see other personalities from Root Sports there. Well, hold on to your hats, folks, because a former goaltender and friend of the podcast, Linda Cohn, is joining the team. That's right. Linda Cohn, as well as Ian Furness, will join the crew as hosts and will take over some of that work. And again, we mentioned John, Eddie, JT, Allison, and Piper all back. Quote, together, this all-star crew will deliver the in-depth analysis, electrifying calls, and insider coverage that takes you straight to the heart of Kraken hockey. So this is super exciting. It's a bunch of people that I've gotten to know over the years. Linda Cohn, as of course, from ESPN, a New Yorker. But if you listen to our interview with Linda, I guess over a year ago now, you know that she got her start in Seattle in a really big way. And Jeff Baker, who of course now is writing for the Seattle Kraken at kraken.com or nhl.com/Kraken, he has a really cool article on Linda Cohn, and a lot of that stuff we talked to Linda about on our podcast. So if you haven't listened or watched that podcast, highly recommend it. Linda will be still doing Sports Center. I think it's around 15 games that I saw that Linda will be a part of that. So Ian, I'm sure, alongside Allison, and I don't know if Piper fills the role of Nick, if Piper is going to do what Piper has always done. I'm curious to see how that's going to work. I mean, I think it could be a little bit of both, to be honest, and we'll be fine. Does JT do a little bit more of kind of what we saw Nick and Allison doing? Does Allison take on a bigger role? I'm just excited. So on September 22nd, I should say on September 23rd, or is the 23rd, whenever the next podcast is after that first game, you best believe I'm going to have some thoughts on what the broadcast looks like. I mean, I'm super excited. Locked On is a part of the TEGNA family. We've talked about that before. So I'm super excited to see what this is going to look like, and super excited to see what this is going to mean for you as a listener of Locked On Kraken. I will be in Seattle. I'll be visiting with some folks. We're going to get everything sorted for you, because what I would love to do, especially that we are a part of the TEGNA family, is to find ways to really level up this year's content coming from Locked On Kraken. So stay tuned for that. Until then, be kind to yourself, be kind to one another. Let's hold fast. Let's stay true. And oh, baby, you'll get to chant and cheer with the whole crew soon enough, saying loud and proud, let's go Kraken. Enjoy your day, everyone. I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out.